Ty Simpson has been highly discussed. So let's get to the latest. Shows up at a good weight at 210. Throws pretty well. Reportedly, hopefully, did well during the interviews. Fact or fiction? Is Ty Simpson a lock to be a top 10 pick after this week?
It's fiction. I mean, I don't know, Joe. I feel like generally speaking, you're a little bit higher on Ty Simpson than I am. So I'm sure that you will kind of rebuttal and yell at me a little bit, which is totally fine. That's what this podcast is here for. But Joe, I don't know, man. I just heard nothing in Indianapolis that told me that he's going to be a lock top 10 pick, even though there's a couple quarterback needy teams in the top 10, like the New York Jets at 2 and the Cleveland Browns. Excuse me, I was calling them the Cleveland Cavaliers, the Cleveland Browns at number 6. I don't see it, Joe. He does not look like to me a guy that typically rises to the top 10 in a draft at the quarterback position. I know that there is a quarterback tax. There's a quarterback demand, which makes quarterbacks usually tend to jump up the board. But he just doesn't strike me as a guy that a team is going to be oohing and awing over to make that ascension into being a top 10 pick. I think that Ty could very well go in the middle to late first round. That's kind of the bucket that I think he's in right now in this desperate class with only one quarterback that's going to go in the top 10. That's how I see it, man. I do not see a top 10 draft pick, and I did not get any buzz in Indianapolis that I thought, yeah, this guy's going to go a lot earlier than some people believe.
I'm going fact, as I often disagree with you. Yes. This is not off of buzz or anything that we might have heard. This is just reading the map for a guy like Ty Simpson to fit into this puzzle that is the top 15 picks, top 10 picks of the 2026 class. I get what you're saying, but I personally see Ty Simpson as a better prospect than Jackson Dart. Jackson Dart had a lot of swinging outcomes during last draft process. Some people said he was a top 3 guy. Some people said he would end up going in the second round. Lo and behold, he's a New York Giant and he's picked 25. I think if Simpson is a better prospect and has a better projectable ceiling than Dart, more teams will be less inclined to hesitate about picking him. The big difference between this year's draft class and last year's draft class, there are more desperate teams to figure out their futures. I feel like we can map out multiple situations where there are coaches that need to solidify some sort of a foundation. Now, I know there's a lot of coaches that are in their first years that are in those spots where you've got Monken with the Browns, you've got McCarthy with the Steelers. It feels plausible to me that the Jets could maybe use that second pick that they have to trade back up and to grab him. But there's also multiple options for the Dolphins to consider it, for the Cardinals to consider it. I just think, Ryan, for a year where there's so few options, there's less options than last year. We're going to get to Taylor Green and Colt Payton later, but we're turning Colt Payton and Taylor Green into something. We're trying to turn those guys into prospects because we're so desperate to find a viable option. It just feels like he's checking the right boxes. And to relate this back to Jackson Dart, I feel like his pre-draft process has been better than Dart's to this point. I know that he didn't go to the Senior Bowl, but I feel like he's got more to latch onto with the way that he threw for him to end up going somewhere in the top 10.
So let me ask you a question here on the because I don't think I actually disagree that Ty Simpson is a better prospect than Jackson Dart. I still need to finalize my Ty Simpson grade, but generally speaking, I wasn't a huge Jackson Dart fan, so I think that they'll relatively probably be around the same, and I wouldn't be shocked if Simpson's a little higher. But my question for you is, Joe, is first and foremost, I think the jump from 25 Jackson Dart to top 10 is still a pretty sizable jump there, right? As far as the draft capital. But I think traditionally people get desperate for quarterbacks in the top that maybe they shouldn't in the top 10 when they have these just tantalizing traits, right? Guys that they look at and say, that's a guy that it can be developed. And I look at Ty Simpson and I don't see a tantalizing, traitsy quarterback. I see some nice qualities in a quarterback that I like, but my question is like, who was the last quarterback from a just physical skill set perspective do you think a team spent a top 10 draft pick on? I'm just kind of like recollecting in my mind for a second. Usually the guys that were just like going 8 over in the top 10 are guys that are either super advanced, like a Joe Burrow, and have that type of requisite traits, or it's a super toolsy guy like a Josh Allen or like a Patrick Mahomes or like someone like that, where you're just like, they might not be finished products today, but I'm going to bet on those traits still early on in the draft. I don't think that Ty Simpson fits in the bucket of this purely refined player because he's a one-year starter who was uneven in his 1 year as a starter, and I don't consider him a huge traitsy guy. So I'm just kind of curious of like, what bucket does he land in that says top 10 draft pick? I just don't necessarily see that.
Well, I think that as you said earlier, the tax of him being a quarterback and there being a limited supply increases the demand for him ended up going earlier. The closest I can think of, and he still is relatively traitsy, was Penix, who went 8th overall. That was like the first guy that
Penix was super experienced though. So like the two buckets were experienced, a little bit more pro ready, or traitsy, underdeveloped, right? Like those are the two buckets. I don't think that we typically get a guy like Ty Simpson who is, again, like solid to good traits, but also inexperienced. Like, I just don't think that bucket meshes to being a top 10 draft pick. I don't think that combination meshes to being that. That's just my thoughts.
I understand that perspective. The two guys that come to mind that did go outside of the top 10, this doesn't necessarily support my argument, but it kind of does. Mac Jones, who was selected 15th overall in 2021, and the other option would be Bo Nix, who was selected in the teens by the Denver Broncos. And I think that Simpson's has more tools than Mac Jones did, but he's got slightly less, probably about the same as Bo Nix did. Bo Nix, very experienced. Mac Jones, not that experienced, hadn't played that much football as the last guy of the string of really good quarterbacks for Alabama to go in the first round since Simpson came around. I think that where those guys went in the teens, and this requires a little bit of connective tissue with the take. Okay. I think that those guys going in the teens works for my argument because they were in draft classes that were dense at quarterback. That there was a lot of quarterbacks that went in the first round. The traitsy guys went in the first round that year, early in the first round that year. Right. And I think that there's nobody in that bucket to the point where Mendoza, who at least has tools, a big framed kid, big strong kid, cerebral smart kid, he already gets floated up, pushed up because he's the only option, and he's about half of the toolsiness of a typical first round pick. I think that that lack of available options makes Simpson better. I know that I feel like I'm being quite abstract about this, but that's my best way of explaining it.
Because I won the argument. I won this argument on this section of the podcast.
There's no defined winners. There's no defined winners.
You know what else I think doesn't play? You know what else I don't think goes into your advantage here either, Joe, is that the Jets have the number 2 overall selection, right? They have number 2 overall selection. If Ty Simpson does go in the top 10, it is going to be the back end of the top 10. I do not see a team drafting him number 2 overall, right? So I throw the Jets out the window for a second because it's more likely the Jets take him at 16 and they draft him at 2, in my opinion, right?
Maybe they get panicked. Maybe they get panicked by sitting at 16 and someone, maybe it's the Dolphins or the Rams showing interest in moving up. And they just go, you know what? We don't want to miss out. We really like Simpson. We were hoping he'd slide to his 16. That, to me, I think is one of the bigger dominoes just in the general Ty Simpson picture, is finding how attached the Jets are to Simpson. If I recall correctly from a conversation that we had, maybe I was having this conversation. I don't know if you were part of this. Somebody I spoke to in Indianapolis told me that the Jets didn't really like Ty Simpson. But
I think a report came out about that too, so I think that's kind of out in the open a little bit. You can't trust everything you hear, obviously.
Hold on. Hold on though. The amount of times that's happening, I recall back to when CJ Stroud got picked, and I heard from multiple people that the Texans didn't like CJ Stroud. So it's the whole BS.
I was backing you up. I was saying that, some of those reports you never know because there's deflection and there's lies happening. So I don't think that proves you right or wrong. I don't think it proves me right or wrong. It's just information that's out there that we kind of have to cipher through a little bit. I will just say this, though, Joe, just to finish off my thought, number 2 overall, I do not see Ty Simpson going that high, right? So the next question is, do the Cleveland Browns, who just spent 2 picks on a quarterback last year and are in a really just strange position right now, right? Yeah. Do they want to add to the clown show that is already their quarterback room that still technically also has Deshaun Watson in it? Do you want to add Ty Simpson in to be like, here's our clown show, here's the weirdness of the Cleveland Browns quarterback room? Unless the wild card here, and I will give you credit to this for one thing you said, the wild card is the Miami Dolphins. Like, they're the weird one of is there some
no one really knows
pressing need to want to go get a quarterback? I have no idea. I tend to think they're going to go veteran with like a Malik Willis with the obvious connections that they have to Malik Willis in that front office and in that coaching staff. But we will see what the Dolphins ultimately end up doing.
At the end of the day, whoever picks Ty Simpson, I think, is going to be extremely obvious after free agency because there's very few viable free agent quarterbacks or quarterbacks that can be traded for. So
what do you mean? Derek
Carr's
coming out of retirement. Derek Carr's coming out of retirement. What do you mean?
Seriously. No, but in all seriousness, though, I don't know if enough people have talked about this. It's going to be kind of funny to realize free agency is going to settle, and then everyone's going to look and go, that team doesn't really have anyone. That team doesn't really have, what are you doing? What are you cooking up over there? I think that there's a chance that ends up happening, and we should recklessly assume that they're going to take Ty Simpson.